us today.
If you're looking to get some solid advice on broadening your way of looking at things, consider the 19th century British philosopher John Stuart Mill. He believed that people benefited from listening to moral views that were different than one's own. After all, we're fallible and therefore make mistakes in our moral judgments, as history shows. There just might be a germ of truth in an opposing moral view. But surely there are limits. What possible benefit can I derive from engaging in a discussion with a racist or someone who's homophobic or sexist? I'm not going to change his mind, and he's certainly not going to change mine. As the saying goes, you can't teach a pig to dance. It just makes the pig angry and frustrates the hell out of you. Mr. Mill would disagree.
Mill said to do so doesn't at all threaten the strength of your conviction. In fact, it will help it. And here's why. You have to remember and really recall in an active way the grounds for your moral belief, the things that you are most certain about. You have to recall why you are so convinced of those truths, what the justification is for them, what the reasons are why you are so committed to them. And that ensures that the moral truths that you do think you've attained are held by you as living truths, truths that you actually fully understand and can articulate the rationale for. You understand why they're true. I teach at York University, and there's a certain ethos, which is inclusive and lefty and committed to social justice and all those sorts of things. And within that context, if you ask a student who is absolutely sure that racism is wrong, why it's wrong, you get a very funny reaction. First, they want to dismiss the question. They want to say, well, it just is. As though, and this is the important point, right? As though anyone who would ask that question is such a moral idiot that they're not even worth engaging in. But if they don't engage, they don't actually know why they think racism is wrong. But if they don't understand why racism is wrong and why they think it's wrong, then it's a value that's much more easily eroded. Things that we merely mimic from others, we can give up at virtually no cost. And so there's always a benefit to being challenged to provide the rationale for what you believe. And then your convictions aren't just on the surface, dead dogmas. They're really felt and lived, and you understand the rationale, and you can apply the principles that underwrite the moral certainty that you have there into new and difficult situations about which you might not be so certain.
Truth is never possessed. It's never possessed scientifically. If we think we have the answers to the universe, we won't go any farther. When I was born, the standard was the universe was 150 million light years wide. Well, that's not even outside of our galaxy today. And today, the standard is that we are 14.5 billion years old from the Big Bang. But that's as far as we can see right now. We have no idea. And we have to keep our minds open to the fact that there may be a whole section of reality that we simply can't conceive of right now. We can't see it. We can't sense it. We don't know what it's about. We don't know how many dimensions of reality there are, all of these things. Donald Rumsfeld was really criticized when he talked about the unknown unknown. But in fact, that is a principle in philosophy, that we have to understand that there are things we aren't even thinking about yet. I'm not saying that every one of us can completely open ourselves, but we can at least have a grasp of the fact that we are not completely open. That itself is an advance of morality when I begin to sense my moral blindness.
If you ask me an opinion on any major philosophical issue or political issue, I tend to see all sides not out of any innate being a better person or something. It's just the way I function. Skepticism runs in my family. So I may have even inherited a gene for skepticism, if there is such a thing. I'm being only half facetious.
Dr. Robert Burton is a neurologist and former chief of neurology at Mount Zion University of California, San Francisco Hospital. He is also the author of I'm Being Certain, Believing You Are Right, Even When You're Wrong.
In virtually every sphere, whether it's been discussion about whether or not to be economically or to be in terms of Iraq or Afghanistan, everybody postulates or stands on the pedestal of certainty, and it's led us down some horrible paths, both in terms of global policy, domestic policy, even the inability to come to grips with global warming. As a result of which, I started to ask myself, why are people so certain? Is this all simply personality, or is there something within our inherent biology that makes some of us more certain than others? And so I started to think, well, what if there were aspects of brain function that actually created a sense of conviction or certainty or of being right, and that if you understand that certainty arises out of involuntary brain mechanisms that are beyond your control, you have to acknowledge the fact that even though you might feel certain, that this is no different in a way than being angry or feeling love or resentment or whatever.
His book challenges some of our most basic assumptions on how we reason and come to conclusions. It could easily have been titled, Don't Believe Everything You Think.
Virtually all the science now points to reason as being a function of the brain, but that emotions, feelings, mood states influence how we start reasoning at its very beginning. We don't start at a neutral starting point. So if you think in terms of pure reason as being the paradigm for the proper life, you're going against what our modern-day science is telling us about our brain function.
Feeling and thinking are not two distinct processes? Haven't we always been told, don't let feelings cloud your thinking? Well, apparently this admonishment is based on a complete misunderstanding of how we've been wired to learn.
If you run up a tree and escape a charging tiger, and that is a way that you learn how to avoid a tiger, but then you could say, will this always work? And then your mind sets out to think of examples of when it might not work. For example, let's say the tree trunk is too thin and you fall down and the tiger eats you. So you'd say, well, it will work if the tree's strong enough. But I can think of examples where maybe it wouldn't work. So I could say it's right this time because the tree trunk is very strong and will hold me up. But I can't always know the tensile strength of every tree that I run against. So each time I'll have to ask, is this going to work? And it will be a probability equation. I can never know with certainty that this is right. Therefore, I'm always going to be asking, it's true this time, but I don't know if it'll be true in the future. It's hard to learn that way. You've got to learn it's true now and it will be true in the future, even if that's not true. A thought by itself can never be finished. You need something to stop that process and go, aha, that's right. I realized finally that you need a second system within the brain. You need a feeling about your thought, some sense in your brain that the thought you have is correct. And more recent studies have shown that the areas of the brain in which these phenomena of feelings of understanding or knowing arise actually have rich connections with the area of the brain that provides reward systems. And I finally realized, well, then there must be the reward for a thought, and the reward for a thought is the feeling the thought's correctness. Every time that you feel that sense, I'm right, you are rewarded in the same way as you're rewarded if you took cocaine, alcohol, cigarettes, gambling, and won a lottery. It doesn't make any difference. It's the same reward system. And I think that this feeling of being right is, for many people, just as strong an addiction. And you hear these people on television, for example, saying, I know that I'm right. There's a big smile on their face. They're